simple diffusion. Also, it doesn't take any energy to force those molecules in or out, so it's known as passive transport. Simple diffusion moves with the flow, meaning it moves with the concentration gradient. Molecules move from high concentration to low concentration. So when you hear someone saying that something's going with the concentration gradient, that's what they mean. They mean it's going from a high concentration of molecules to a low concentration of molecules. Now, remember how we said the cell membrane is actually a pretty complex structure? Well, one thing we haven't mentioned yet are proteins in the membrane, and some of them are transport proteins. Some transport proteins act as channels. Some of these proteins actually change their shape to get things across. Some of them open and closed based on some kind of stimulus. All of these are good things because it's helping with molecules that may be too big to cross the membrane on their own, or molecules that are polar and therefore need the help of a transport protein. This is known as facilitated diffusion. It's still diffusion, and it still moves with the concentration gradient of high to low. It doesn't require energy, though, so it's also a type of passive transport. It's just the proteins are facilitating or helping things pass. Charged ions often require a protein channel in order to pass through. Glucose needs the help of a transport protein to pass through. In osmosis, for water to travel at a fast rate across the membrane, it passes through protein channels called aquaporins. So these are all examples of facilitated diffusion, which is a type of passive transport and moves with the concentration gradient of high to low concentration. Now all the transport we've mentioned has been passive in nature. That means it's going from high concentration to low concentration. But what if you want to go the other way? For example, the cells lining your gut, they need to take in glucose. But what if the concentration of glucose in the cell is higher than the amount of glucose concentration in the environment? We still need to get the glucose in, so it's going to have to be forced against the regular gradient flow. Movement of molecules from low to high concentration will take energy because that's against the flow. Typically, it's going to require ATP energy. A reminder that ATP, adenosine triphosphate, it has 3 phosphates. And when the bond for the last phosphate is broken, it releases a great amount of energy. Yeah, so ATP is a pretty awesome little molecule. You know what word gets thrown around a lot, but is actually pretty challenging to understand? Osmosis. But it does answer some great questions like, why would it be deadly to give someone an IV of pure water? Or why would a saltwater fish placed in fresh water experience major problems? We'll answer these questions as well as explain the process of osmosis. Now, first understand that osmosis is the movement of water, and that really is a type of diffusion. Often when you're talking about osmosis, you're talking about the movement of water through a semi-permeable membrane like a cell membrane. A cell membrane has openings small enough for water molecules to pass, but it will not allow larger things like salt molecules to freely pass, at least not without assistance. Osmosis is a type of passive transport, meaning that it doesn't require energy. I mentioned osmosis is a type of diffusion, and similar to what you might have learned about with diffusion, molecules, in this case water, travel from areas of high concentration of water to low concentration of water. But there's another way to think about water movement in osmosis. A low water concentration likely means there are a lot of solutes. Solutes are substances like salt or sugar that can be dissolved within a solvent, like water. Water has the tendency to move to areas where there is a high solute concentration, which means there's less water concentration. So if you want to easily figure out where the water will travel, look to the side where there is a greater solute concentration. So let's imagine you have a box with a semi-permeable membrane in the center. And remember, this membrane will let tiny things pass through it like water and gases, but not large solutes like salt. We'll label one side of the box A and one side of the box B.
If you had pure water on both sides of the box, those water molecules, they're moving. Water molecules, they like to move. But the net movement of water on the two sides is zero, meaning the overall change in direction of movement is zero. Now let's imagine on side B, you dump a huge amount of salt there. Salt molecules are too large to pass through this membrane. So which direction will the water move towards? A or B? The answer is B. This area has a high solute concentration, and remember, water moves to areas of higher solute concentration. You can almost think of the water as trying to equalize the concentrations, diluting side B. Once equilibrium is reached, the net movement of water on the two sides will be zero, but remember that water still likes to move, and movement still occurs. Here's some vocabulary to know. We call side B hypertonic. You know that prefix hyper when you think of a hyper person? Well, that helps me think of a high amount of something. For a hyper person, it might be caffeine. But in our case, it means a high solute concentration. But we can't just say something is hypertonic without comparing it to something else. We say that side B is hypertonic to side A because it has a greater solute concentration than side A. In osmosis, water moves to the hypertonic side. We say side A is hypotonic. Hypo rhymes with low, which helps me remember that it's a lower solute concentration, at least when compared to side B. So let's do some real-life examples now, because this box thing is getting a little bit boring. When someone gets an IV in a hospital, it may look like the clear fluid running through the IV is water. But it is certainly not water. That would actually be a disaster because of osmosis.